It would help if I turned the microphone on so people could hear. So today I'm doing the Hacker Noon AMA. So it's I was nominated for a few of the Noonie Awards on Hacker Noon, and they asked if I would do kind of an AMA on Twitter, live on Twitter, and I decided to live stream it, and I'll answer the questions on Twitter and in real time. So if you have any questions, so if you're on my live stream, go ahead and tweet them to me also. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. So before I start, if you're coming onto the stream because you're one of the people that watches my streams, Hacker Noon is a really cool tech blogging website, and they're the ones that are doing these Noonie Awards. They're the ones that are doing this AMA, and they're just an awesome site. It's an awesome tech site. It's run by just a few people. It's not a big kind of corporation. They do really well at kind of curating the best stories, the best articles, and it's just a really cool place to hang out. I started writing for them last year, and coincidentally, there's one of my pages or one of my articles on the front page today, why front-end developers should choose Go. We'll see how that does. And I'd also like to point out that I'm using restream.io for this. So I'm streaming right now to Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn, all through one single interface, and that's using restream.io. It's really cool. You should really try it out, and that's what I'm using today for my AMA. So I've got a document here with some of the questions, and then I have broken out some of the questions that I received over the weekend, and I'll just start answering them live. And I'm going to watch the chat room here a little bit also. First question, why did the chicken cross the road? I have no idea. But I do like the chicken and egg problem, and I like using that analogy. So maybe they were crossing the road because somebody had an answer to which one of those came first. Next one is, how did you join the Pluralsight team? So I am, let's see, I'll bring that up here, pluralsight.com. So I'm an author for pluralsight.com, and I'm also a technical marketing manager there. I build content for them, etc. And the way I joined them was about 2011 or so. I was working on this project for a big, large corporation. And this project was one of those projects that we got our job done somewhere halfway between the day sometimes. And so essentially what we were doing is building validation tests. And once those things were built, then we had to wait for them to be processed and run and get the test results back so that we could process the test results. So halfway through the day, sometimes we had nothing to do. Sometimes it went to the end of the day, sometimes not. And eventually I got tired of Reddit and Hacker News and all of these different websites, and got tired of BSing with my coworkers in the cubicle next to them. So I went to my boss and I'm like, hey man, I'm bored to death right now. What can you suggest that I do? You know, and I said, I'm getting a lot of these things automated, and you know, sometimes it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I have nothing else to do the rest of the day. And he said, you should try out this Pluralsight. So the company had a subscription to Pluralsight. They added me to it. I started immediately taking like C# and .NET courses, all this crazy stuff. So that's how I discovered it. And then I started to become an advocate. My next job after that, I was a tech lead, and then I was a manager, and I would have the developers that I worked with take these classes. And in 2016, I decided to apply as an author there, and became an author. And it was pretty cool, pretty awesome. I've done 6 courses for them so far. And then last year, I talked to them about coming on full time, doing this technical marketing manager thing. It's been really awesome, huge group of super passionate people. So I've always been the tech skills guy that, you know, at a company that's like, hey, you should learn this, and here's how we can learn this. And I'm like super passionate about it. Kind of a weirdo in some situations. And then I went to Pluralsight, and everybody's like that. Like everybody's super passionate. Everybody's like really just super dedicated to the cause. So that's how I came to Pluralsight. It was kind of a long path, but it was a great path, and I love it there. So let's get to the next question. That was the first one. How has your work routine benefited from remote working during COVID crisis or left unchanged? For me, it was unchanged. So my company is based in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I work remotely. So the only thing that has changed for me is that now my coworkers work remotely. And so far it's been pretty good. I mean, for the most part, I know these people. I've met them in person a couple of times, but most of my interaction with them has been over video. So it hasn't really changed that much. I think it's changed for them. They've had to do a lot of adapting and changing. But for the most part, my work routine has been about the same. A funny thing about work from home. So for the same big corporation that I mentioned earlier, they were doing a bunch of remodeling on a floor, and they basically said, we don't have any room for you guys. So we're like, okay, we're going to have you work remotely for 6 months. And at that time, it was a blessing because I lived so far away. I was over on the south end of Portland, and this one was on the west end, way out in Hillsboro. So I was super stoked to work from home and not drive an hour and a half a day. And it was only supposed to be for 6 months. So we all went, and we were software developers at this time. So we all went home, and this was in around 2009, 2010. We all moved to home to work there for 6 months. It turned out working so well for the team that they just left us at home for a couple of years, up until I left the company, because they just noticed that when they took software engineers and sent them home, that they were actually more productive. Now, it's not always the case, but in our case, it certainly was. And so when I was asking, 9 months later or something, I'm like, hey, aren't we supposed to come back to the office? And they're like, no, you guys are doing too well. You don't have to come back unless you want to. So yeah, I think this COVID crisis is horrible and terrible, but I think it's going to change how people work for sure. Next question. In a world of tech giants like Google and Twitter, can society still enjoy the freedom of information? That's a great question. And I'm going to switch to Twitter and answer some of these Twitter ones. I think society can still enjoy the freedom of information. Those might be two big, huge hubs of information, and they might be able to filter that information, and they should filter that information in some cases. But I still think we have the freedom of information. Anybody can go and spin up a blog on anything they want for relatively cheap. And I think we still enjoy that quite a bit. So here's the first question that I found on Twitter. What's the most efficient way to educate oneself in Linux? So I'm just going to talk and type for this one. And I'm not sure exactly how great this is going to work, but I'm going to top and type. Spin up a virtual machine. That's the very first thing you should do if you want to educate yourself in Linux. Don't break your computer. Don't go and install it on your laptop and wipe out your Windows or your Mac partition. Spin up a virtual machine. VirtualBox is a great option. Then start using it for day-to-day things. Email, browsing, etc. Find things you'd like to do and Google how to do it. You learn the system. So this is what I think the best way to do it is just grab a virtual machine, pick out a distribution that you like. I really like Pop! OS. So if you Google Pop! OS, Pop! OS is very similar to Windows, but it's Linux. It's based on Ubuntu, which is super easy to use. Also, Pop! OS is very mature, and it has a company behind it, which kind of puts some people off. It has System 76. They build laptops and machines. However, I think it's a good thing in this case because System 76 has a vested interest in making this Linux distribution good and solid because it reflects their machines and how good and solid their machines are. So they've done a ton of work on Pop! OS, making it solid, easy to use. It's got an awesome interface. It's one of my favorite things. I've been using Arch Linux for like 10 years on my laptop and my main machine, And I'm thinking about wiping Arch Linux off my laptop to put Pop! OS on there just because it's so well done and so mature and clean. So I'll put in there as a part of my response, check out Pop! OS. And that's my answer to that first question. I see I have a bunch of notifications here, so I'll probably have even more questions. Here's the next one. What's better, front end, back end, or full stack in terms of career advancement? Oh, this one is always one of those. I'm going to have to try really hard not to give out a attorney answer, which of course is it depends. So I think that out of all of three of those, they have equal career advancement. And I'll kind of explain why. So if you decide you're going to dedicate everything you have to front end to become the best front end developer you can possibly be, you're going to do well in your career. That's the same with back end or full stack, because what it really comes down to is solving problems. That's what you're paid to do. You're not paid to build front end software. You're not paid to build back end software. You're paid to solve problems. How effectively you solve those problems is going to be the big differentiator in your career. So that is a terrible non-answer, but it is an honest answer. And I spelled differentiator wrong, didn't I? Maybe not. Differentiation. I don't know. I'll keep it. And I only say this, keep in mind, because of the demand, that's one of the factors of career advancement, of course, is demand. So if we were living in a time where there was low demand for one of those things, then I would say, there are no back-end development jobs out there, so go for front-end. But right now, all of those are in high demand. Front-end, back-end, full stack, high demand everywhere, so keep that in mind. If we were living in a different world where one of those things was a dead end and there wasn't a lot of demand, then I would probably say to focus on that. But with all things being equal, focus on what you love to do and go for it. Let's see what the next one. And the next one is, what language is best for AI sphere? I'm not an AI expert. I've been digging into it. I've been really digging into it and learning it. However, I am far from an AI expert, but I will say the obvious gimme answer would probably be at this point Python, because of the way it connects everything. So 3 reasons. Its ability to connect different technologies. Python works really great. You can point it here, you can point it there, you can point it to this. Python is a glue language for sure. So I'd say its ability to connect to everything, super easy to pick up. I recently did a podcast interview with a Douglas Starnes, with a Python developer, and he said, you can learn Python in a couple hours, and in a couple of days you can be dangerous. And that's absolutely true. So I'd say if it's easy to pick up, if you're an AI person and you're really good with math, or you're really good with data, or you're really good with all of these things, but you're not a programmer, you'll be able to jump into Python and start using it to get what you need done. So I would say the best one for now is probably Python. Let's see, perhaps I should be closing these as I go. Next question is, what do you enjoy more, writing blog posts or code? That is I could tell you which one is harder, but I don't know which one I enjoy more. I actually love writing blog posts and I love writing code. Generally, I write code before I write a blog post to test things out. But what's more challenging is writing blog posts. So with code, I've been doing it for close to 20 years. It's not easy. Solving problems is, and I'm going to silence my phone here because I thought I silenced it. But, for me, writing code is very intuitive, very natural. Of course, I run into problems just like everybody else all the time. However, with writing blog posts, I think I'm a lot more, I'm not sure how you'd put it. I do a lot more self-examination and I'm more critical on myself as I'm writing blog posts. So for this answer, I'll probably just say writing code. I would rather have a machine judge me than people judge me. So I feel a little more confident with code as I'm building it, but. And I'm not sure how to format the seed. I'm being critical again. And I'll preface this. So I enjoy doing both of them. They say if you won the lottery tomorrow, what would you do? I would still be doing this. I would still be writing code and still be writing articles. I would probably just do a little bit more fishing and traveling with my family, but I would bring a laptop because I really enjoy this stuff. Probably a little too much. Oh, and that leads perfectly into this next question. If you could spend your next year doing whatever you'd like, how do you prioritize? So this is going to sound crazy, but I think I am going to spend the next year doing whatever I like. The job that I'm doing right now, I really love it. I'm enjoying it immensely. So if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would not be putting in my 2 weeks notice. I would still, like I said, I would probably just ask for some PTO for some fishing trips for a while. But if I could spend, how would I prioritize? I would look to my core whys. So if you've ever read the book Start With Why and Finding Your Why, those are really cool books. Those books kind of changed the way I look at everything. And my whys are definitely solving problems. Absolutely love solving problems. Absolutely love building things. And then I like teaching other people those things. So I would be doing pretty much the same thing I'm doing now. So I think that's a pretty good answer. Look to my core whys. I love solving problems, building things, and teaching others. All activities would point back to that. So yeah, that would go back to my core whys. I would probably answer calls during the day at the fire department because I'm a volunteer firefighter, as a lot of people know. And during the day I'm here at work, so I'll hear a pager go off or something, and if it's something big, I'm like, I wish I could go to that. So I would probably do that a little bit more, maybe take a week of just volunteering would be kind of cool, but I think that's a pretty good answer. And Vincent Harrison says, what tech education should be free for all? Or should tech education be free for all? That's an economic question. I took a couple economics classes in college, but I'm nowhere near an expert on why economically things are the way they are. But I'll respond back and say, I think as free as possible. Provide free education. I don't like the word training very much. So my answer is I think it should be as free as possible. However, capital is needed to accomplish the goal of teaching. You have to have capital to really, truly provide a teaching experience. So there's a ton of free stuff on the internet. There's weirdos like me that blog for free for years and years and years. Companies put out a bunch of free stuff. My company, Pluralsight, puts out a lot of free stuff. We do have free weekends and free courses you can take. So I think it's great when organizations put out free content whenever they can. However, nobody can really give it all out for free, especially in tech when you have things like cloud education. You're going to have to pay for that. So that's my great answer. And I've got one coming in from chat that I'll get to here in a second. Let's see. What's the best degree for a coder to have? It can be none. So that's one of the things in the tech industry. There's always the argument about, should you have a degree? Yes or no. Should you have a CS degree? Yes or no. I don't have a CS degree. I have a degree in like network engineering, which is a lot different than computer science. And there have been ways where there have been gaps in my education that I had to fill in the good old fashioned way, right? So I think I've worked with people that have no degree at all, and they've been outstanding. So when I became a tech manager the first time and I was kind of given free range, they said, well, what kind of education requirements? And I basically said none. Let's high school diploma. If they're able to make it through high school and graduate and then go out there and dig and claw their way through figuring out how to write software, then get them in here. So I would say the best degree for you to have is probably something you're passionate about. That's how I'm going to answer this one. I have a friend who is very, very technical and has a great job. He's about my age, and I'm not going to name it. He has a great job, and I think his degree is in possibly anthropology. So it's basically whatever you're passionate about at the time, And I'll say it even though somebody will probably argue with me and flame me about it, but I'll say a degree is not required for tech. There we go. So if you're really interested in anthropology or biology or something like that, go get a degree in that. And even if you're not going to get a job, you're going to be doing something you love. You're going to learn some basics. One of the things that I had to do for my degree was a ton of writing. And guess what I'm doing all the time for my career now, and what I've done throughout the last 20 years, a bunch of writing. So, degrees are not worthless by any means. And CS degrees are very important, especially mathematics, things like that. Very important, especially if you get into AI. So I'm going to take this chat question here from Matt, who I love Matt. He's a very, very awesome guy who's a friend of mine. He said, "What is your spirit animal?" That's a lion. You know it's a lion. But in your career, what project or collaboration are you the most proud of and why? I would say that's really tough. One of the things I was really proud of from a technical point of view was working at research and development. We were on this really cool project, and one of the reasons I really liked it is because the aim of the project, this is for a big company, I might as well say Intel, because I don't think there's any other company that had a project like this, but we were working on this project where they have 64 core processors, and I couldn't talk about it with anybody at the time, of course, but it's been years, so I can now, but they have a 64 core processor on a chip, on a card, and we'd have servers where you could put up to 8 of these cards together. And so you have to ask, well, what does anybody need that kind of crazy CPU power for? And what they were using it for is machine learning and cancer detection. So I thought it was really cool that, I just had this small piece of this project. And, I was there like writing Python and doing this Linux scripting, and we're coming up with all these cool like automations to set up testing. I wasn't one of the PhDs that was in there designing the chip and stuff, but we were trying to get those chips to produce the most processing power for the least amount of electricity possible. And I was really proud of our work that we did on that, because a lot of it was going down to University of Texas. It was going to all these different universities to do cancer research. So I thought that the why behind that was really cool. The Classmate PC project, also at Intel, was very awesome. It was not successful, but it was a project to try to put these small little laptops in the hands of kids in like third world countries to do their schoolwork. That was another one that had a really good why behind it. And the collaboration I'm working on right now with Pluralsight also has a ton of why behind it for the exact same reasons. We're trying to democratize tech skills, trying to bring tech skills into third world countries, into smaller areas, low income areas. And that for me is a big why that pushes me, that I really enjoy. So that's a long, crazy answer, but I like working on things that matter. And it's not always possible. Sometimes you're building calendar apps. What's your top programming language? I'll answer this one. I'm wearing my Go shirt right now. It's Go. Fun. Without spell check, I would be screwed. So right now it's Go, because I'm having fun building these small, efficient programs. Super powerful. My lifetime favorite is probably still C#. And there's a funny thing about programming languages. People will ask, what's the best programming language? And sometimes they'll even say, what programming language should I just focus on for the rest of my career? And the thing is it goes back to what I said earlier. You're paid to solve problems, not paid to write code. What solves the problem the best way? Sometimes that answer is Python. Sometimes it's PHP. It's JavaScript, Go, Rust, whatever. And there are little, there are idioms with each language that make it better. There are little problems with every single language. So you just have to decide whether the language can solve the problem for you and you can put up with the problems of that language. I mentioned Go. Go is not a magic silver bullet language. It has a lot of deficiencies. Same thing with C Sharp. C Sharp is this extremely mature language, and I've done crazy things with C Sharp, but I wouldn't pick C Sharp for every single project I ever work on. So you basically just have to decide, okay, do I need this to be fast? Do I need it to be cheap? Do I need it to be built quickly? Do I need whatever? JavaScript, I think, has a ton of downsides. I'm not a huge fan of JavaScript as a language. However, I am a fan of using JavaScript to solve problems because it solves problems very well in a lot of ways. How ethical AI really is. Another AI question, which I don't know a ton about AI. AI is only as ethical as the people using it, I would say. So AI is only a tool. I shouldn't say fear, I should say apprehension. So this is my answer. AI is only a tool. It's only how it's used. It's basically the same thing as, how ethical are hammers? Well, they're great when you're building a house. They're not so great when you hit somebody with it. I think AI is the exact same way. I have a lot of apprehension with some of the things. Like I work with computer vision lately. I've been trying to do a lot with image recognition and computer vision, and that is one of the ways that's being abused quite a bit. Unfortunately, I think there's a stigma even that hangs over it right now. Like, oh, you're going to use this for evil. Someone's going to use it for evil. Absolutely, but they're also using it to do some really cool things. So it's all in how it's used. And here's one from the big man himself, from David. So this is the founder of Hacker Noon. I better get this one right. How do you see smart mirrors evolving over time? Is that something that could reach mass adoption? So if you don't know what smart mirrors are, they're really cool. I'm not sure why I haven't built one yet, but I definitely have looked it up and researched them. And basically what they are is take a mirror, put a display behind it, put a Raspberry Pi or Arduino or something, and it displays the weather, your emails, things like that. I definitely see a future with that. The two biggest problems that I see with smart mirrors right now are obviously how thin they are. So one of the things you have to do if you're putting a Raspberry Pi on the back of it or any kind of chip on the back is you have to allow some room for that. So you'll have a mirror that's, 2 inches from your wall, not really that great of an experience. So you could cut a hole in your sheetrock and push it back if you're allowed to do something like that or good with doing something like that. And then the second part is power supply. You're either going to have to change batteries all the time or you're going to have to find a way to hide that cord. So I think if a company comes out with a solution that, let's say, just puts kind of like an electrical outlet. So you have an electrical outlet, there's a recessed enclosure there. If there's a company that comes out with a smart mirror product with a recessed enclosure that they put into new houses, then I think that solves pretty much all of those problems. So if it runs off of the house power, it doesn't stick out really far. And I say new houses because I think it's much easier to just drop something like that into a new house as it's being built, as opposed to selling it as a kit for people to go in and start chopping up their own stuff. But I think if a company comes up with a good solution there, that it would have some huge adoption. I mean, who doesn't want to go in the mirror and be like, oh, look, I've got some emails and here's what the weather is like today. So let's see if I can put this into 140 characters. And how we're doing pretty well for time, it looks like. All right, bunch of notifications here. Holy moly, this is a lot of stuff to scroll through. So, yep, that looks like the last one. Let's see if there's a lot of retweets. And feel free to jump in the chat room if you want, or just send me a tweet. Because, yeah, I think we went through all of them so far. So let's give another shout out to Hacker Noon, right? Really cool tech site. And it's pretty cool. Like some of the topics that they cover is just kind of all over the place. So we have programming, how to use Bulma and Vue.js together. I have no idea what Bulma is, so I will probably read that one. How to learn any programming language. Just some cool content on this site. And look, a Noonies 2020 award nominee. So I've been nominated for, 5 different awards. So please vote for me. I think I was nominated for IoT, web development, Go programming, several of them. I've been writing articles all over the map this year with this website. But this is just a really cool, I really enjoy Hacker Noon as a website. But startup information, I don't read the startup articles as much. I've definitely had my fun in the startup world years ago. So I once worked at a company where our data center was a table with a curtain over it. So, just picture a table, I shouldn't say a curtain, but like a really long tablecloth in the break room. And underneath that were 4 servers. They had 4 Linux servers that were super loud and hot. And when I first started at this startup, there was about 20 people in the company. And they're like, let's go to the data center. And everybody starts laughing. And I'm thinking, I go into this office, it's really small. I know it's not going to be this huge, gigantic data center. And we go into the break room, and under this tablecloth is 4 Linux servers sitting there and a chained set of circuit breakers. No, not circuit breakers. Surge protectors. So it had one surge protector and then several surge protectors coming off of that so that they could run the printer and they could run this terminal machine and these 4 servers. And I said, well, I think, and this is long before I was a firefighter, but I was still thinking of this. I said, well, I think the first thing I'm going to do is figure out this power situation because I'm really surprised that this hasn't caught on fire yet. And I reached over and put my hand on the surge protector. It was a little warm. And so that was my first thing at the company. But that's how small of a startup I've worked for. They just had these servers kind of cobbled together, running really hot underneath a table. And it's pretty fun. Startup life is really cool if you're young and just starting out. One of the biggest benefits to going to a startup is the amount of experience you'll get. So at that company, I was a web developer, database developer, content marketer, SEO, you name it, everything. Network administrator. I mean, if somebody had a problem with their computer, I would come over there like an IT person. So I got a ton of experience from that. And that is one of the benefits of working at a startup or a smaller company. A lot of people say, well, how do I get into a bigger company? I want to work at a big corporation. Remember that these small companies, these small, tiny little companies that are startups, or maybe they're just a small, little Dunder Mifflin company somewhere, you're going to learn a lot because you're going to have to wear a lot of hats. And so that I attribute a lot of the success in my career to working those types of jobs where I had to wear a lot of hats, and I couldn't say, well, that's not my job. And they'd be like, well, it is your job. You're the only person who knows anything about this. So I always recommend hitting up those smaller companies for good experience. So I think I'm going to sign off of here if there are no more questions coming in. And I'm really hoping that I did this AMA right on here. I'm just kind of answering this stuff live on Twitter. And I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll come back, and then I'll probably just sign off. And thank you, everybody, for watching and asking these cool questions and stuff like this. It's been a lot of fun. I have a bunch of cool stuff planned for Hacker Noon soon. But I will be right back. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off of here. Thank you, everybody who asked all these questions. This is really cool. This has been really fun. So I will leave you with my final thing that I say on every stream, and I say it all the time in real life. If I can do it, you can do it. So that's one of those things that that people need to remember, especially as you're coming up into the ranks. A lot of times after a few years, you build confidence and you start to really have this kind of attitude of being able to take on anything. That comes with time. But if you're first starting out, you just got out of school, or you just got out of a code camp, and you're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do this, I assure you that you can. And I say, if I can do it, anyone can do it, mostly because, I grew up out in the country, actually just a few miles from where I live now, but I grew up out in the country with this piece of crap computer. I worked in a lumber mill for a while, and I would read programming books on my lunch break because I was determined to get into this industry and do it. And I came up through the industry, was able to meet a lot of the goals that I had early on, like I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. And I was able to meet those goals. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm not a genius. I'm not Donald Knuth or anything like that. So the biggest differentiator is passion and willingness to learn and change and grow. The opinions that I held even 2 or 3 years ago are junk now. You have to change and adapt and just keep learning and growing. If you look at your code that you wrote a year ago and you think it looks great and awesome, you need to push yourself harder to change what you're doing. So thank you, everybody. This has been great, and I will see you online.